In the summer of 1942, a complaint reached an SS court in occupied Poland. The accused was one of their own, a decorated officer trusted with command. The charges described conduct so far past the limits of even the SS that the file climbed all the way to Heinrich Himmler's desk. Himmler read it. Then he ordered the case closed. The officer kept his command, his men, and his methods. His name was Oskar Dirlewanger. If you want the true stories behind the men history tried to bury, subscribe to Veil History. Every week we bring you the verified record, no myths, no rumors, only what the documents prove actually happened. He was born on the 26th of September 1895 in the Bavarian city of Wurzburg. The family had money. He grew up comfortable, finished his secondary schooling, and passed his Abitur in 1913. By the standards of his class and his time, he was a young man with a future in front of him. First World War reshaped that future. He enlisted with a Württemberg Grenadier Regiment and went to the Western Front. He was wounded more than once and decorated for courage under fire. The war ended, but the violence in his life did not. Like many former soldiers who could not settle back into peace, he joined the Freikorps, the paramilitary bands that crushed leftist uprisings across Germany in the chaos after 1918. He fought in the Ruhr in Saxony in Upper Silesia. By then, killing had become ordinary work. He tried to build a normal life on top of all of it. He studied at university and earned a doctorate in political science. For the rest of his days he would carry the title doctor, a respectable label stretched thin over a man who was anything but. The respectability did not last. In 1934 he was convicted of a sexual offense against a 14-year-old girl. He had also taken a state car and wrecked it while drunk. The court sent him to prison. After his release he was arrested again on a similar charge and sent to a concentration camp, not as a guard but as a prisoner. That should have been the end of Oskar Dirlewanger. It was not, because he held one asset that outweighed any conviction: a friend in high places. Gottlob Berger, an old comrade who rose to become the SS recruitment chief, never abandoned him. Berger pulled him out of disgrace, arranged his service in the Spanish Civil War with the Condor Legion, and then handed him something no court would ever have allowed: a command of his own. Berger's protection was not a single favor, it was a standing arrangement. He shielded Dirlewanger from the consequences of his record again and again, and he sold his usefulness directly to Himmler, who was always hungry for men willing to fight the kind of war he wanted waged in the East. In Spain, Dirlewanger had served alongside the German forces sent to support Franco, and he came home hardened further by that conflict. He returned not as a disgraced convict but as a man Berger could present as a proven soldier, ready for special work. The idea came from the top. Hitler had decided that men convicted of poaching could be useful soldiers. Poachers, the reasoning went, already knew how to track, hunt, and move quietly through forests, exactly the skills needed to chase partisans. An amnesty was offered. On the 14th of June 1940 in the town of Oranienburg, a small penal unit was formed from these convicted poachers. Himmler placed Dirlewanger in command. The unit was called the Wildeb Kommando Oranienburg, the Oranienburg Poachers Commando. The original concept did not survive contact with reality. As the unit grew past 300 men, the careful selection of poachers fell away. Into its ranks came men convicted of premeditated killing, the criminally deranged, and inmates pulled straight out of prisons and camps. The poachers were soon a minority. The formation was renamed after its commander, Sonderkommando Dirlewanger, Special Unit Dirlewanger. It would carry that name into history. Their first posting was the Lublin district of occupied Poland. The stated task was security. What the unit actually did was terrorize the population. They guarded the Lublin ghetto, supervised forced labor sites, and oversaw a Jewish camp at Dietzig Stary. Robbery, beatings, and killing followed them. The conduct was already enough to disturb other SS men who watched it. And still, in August 1941, the regional SS and police leader, Odilo Globoknik, recommended Dirlewanger for promotion. Cruelty in this system was a qualification. In early 1942, the unit was sent east to Belarus for what the Germans called anti-partisan operations. The phrase was a cover. The real policy was the destruction of entire communities suspected of sheltering resistance fighters. Villages were surrounded, the people driven into barns or churches, and the buildings set alight. Those who tried to flee were shot. The historian Timothy Snyder estimated that during the unit's time in Belarus, it killed at least 30,000 people. Other estimates run far higher. Much of the killing had nothing to do with combat. The unit's record of confirmed fights against actual armed partisans was thin. Its record against unarmed villagers was vast. The Germans gave these sweeps clean operational names. Whole regions were declared dead zones, emptied of people and resources so that partisans would have nowhere to shelter and nothing to take. In practice, this meant burning village after village, sometimes 30 in a single operation, and then listing the murdered civilians as enemy dead in the official reports. The unit also seized able-bodied men, women, and children and shipped them west as forced labor. To fill its own thinning ranks, it began pressing local auxiliaries and Soviet prisoners into service, binding more and more people to the crimes it committed. Inside the camps and holding sites under his control, Dirlewanger's behavior turned to something close to medical experiment. Multiple accounts describe him gathering victims for the purpose of injecting them with strychnine, a poison that kills slowly and with great pain, and watching the result as a form of entertainment for himself and his men. He drank heavily and constantly. Those around him recorded a man who erupted into violence with little warning and treated atrocity as recreation. Those who knew him struggled to describe him without reaching for the language of sickness. One contemporary called him a mentally unstable fanatic who turned violent under the pull of drink. Behind his back, his own men reportedly gave him a mocking nickname drawn from his thin, hollow appearance, a gaunt figure who looked nothing like the image the SS liked to project of itself, and who carried out his work with a steadiness that disturbed even the hardened men under him. By the summer of 1942, the conduct of the Sonderkommando had become impossible for parts of the SS to ignore. An investigation was opened. Its findings were sent to an SS court. This was a regime built on mass murder, and even it had drawn up charges against Dirlewanger. The case reached Himmler. He shut it down. No action was taken. The message could not have been clearer. There was no floor beneath which this man could fall because the regime valued exactly what he provided. In 1943, he was decorated with the German Cross in gold. Then came Warsaw. On the 1st of August, 1944, the Polish Home Army rose against the German occupation of the capital. The response from Berlin was total. Himmler issued an order in Hitler quotes name that Warsaw was to be destroyed and its population killed. The order reached the commanders assigned to crush the rising. One of those commanders was Oskar Dirlewanger. According to post-war testimony from a senior SS officer, Dirlewanger received written authority to kill anyone he wished, in any manner he chose. He used it. In the WOLA district of the city, his unit and attached police formations rounded up civilians street by street, often after promising them safe evacuation. Then they shot them. Over roughly 2 days in early August, around 40,000 civilians were killed in WOLA alone, men, women, and children who had taken no part in the fighting. It remains one of the largest massacres of the entire war committed in such a short span of time. The hospitals were not spared. Dirlewanger quotes men set fire to medical buildings with patients still inside. Staff and the wounded were killed where they lay. The accounts that survive from witnesses are difficult to read, and they are consistent across sources. By the 5th of August, Dirlewanger commanded 16 officers and 865 men in Warsaw. Reinforcements brought the number to roughly 2,500. By the time the rising was crushed, only 648 of his men were still standing. The unit suffered enormous losses and inflicted far greater ones on the people of the city. For this, Dirlewanger was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, one of Germany's highest military decorations. His superiors filed reports that hid the true nature of what had happened, presenting slaughter as soldiering. A man who belonged in a cell was instead pinned with a medal. After Warsaw, the unit was sent to put down the Slovak national uprising, and later into fighting in Hungary. The pattern held wherever it went: burned villages, executed civilians, looting, and assault. By early 1945, with Germany collapsing, the formation was formally expanded and redesignated as the 36th WAFFEN Grenadier Division of the SS, a grand title for a unit that remained a band of criminals at its core. In the final battles on the Eastern Front near Guben, Dirlewanger himself was wounded. As the Reich fell apart around him, he did what such men do. He ran. He shed his uniform and his rank and tried to vanish into the wreckage of a defeated country. In the early summer of 1945, he was picked up by French occupation forces and held in a detention site at Altsachsen in the southwest of Germany. He did not stay anonymous. Among the guards were Polish former prisoners of war. They recognized the man behind the name, the commander whose unit had drowned their capital in blood. Over multiple nights, Dirlewanger was beat. On or around the 7th of June 1945, he died of his injuries. The cause was recorded as a fractured skull. He was 49 years old. He was buried at Altsachsen, and for years afterward German officials disputed how a seemingly healthy man had died so suddenly in custody. He never stood trial. He never answered for WOLA, for the burned villages of Belarus, for the people he poisoned for sport, for the prisoners he worked and beat to death, including his own men whom he killed when they displeased him. There was no Nuremberg dock for Oskar Dirlewanger, no verdict read aloud, no sentence handed down by a court of law. The reckoning that found him came in the dark, at the hands of men who had survived everything he represented. History has given him a fitting place. Among the SS officers who ran the machinery of genocide from behind desks, Dirlewanger stands apart as something more direct, a hands-on perpetrator, a man placed in command not despite his record but because of it. The state needed someone willing to do what others would not, and it found him. When even a regime built on murder draws up charges against one of its own and then buries them, it tells you precisely what that man was and precisely what was wanted from him. The unity built became a symbol. It appears in the historical record as the clearest example of what happens when violence is handed to the violent and called duty, when criminals are armed, protected, decorated, and turned loose on the defenseless with the full backing of the state. The villages do not come back. The dead of WOLA were never counted one by one, and the man responsible escaped the courtroom entirely. Dying in a cell before justice could reach him through any lawful door. For the people of Belarus and the survivors of Warsaw, that ending carried a bitter weight. The man who had ordered the burning of their homes and the killing of their families would never sit in a courtroom, never be named in a formal verdict, never be made to listen as the dead were counted in front of him. The records that condemn him were assembled afterward by historians, by investigators, and by the witnesses who lived. His guilt is settled well beyond argument. His punishment never came. That is the record of Oskar Dirlewanger Verified, documented and beyond dispute. Not a soldier, not a doctor, whatever his diploma said, a man the SS itself tried to prosecute and a regime chose to protect. If this is the kind of history you want told honestly and in full, subscribe to Veil History and turn on the bell so the next story reaches you. The names change, but the truth behind them deserves to be remembered exactly as it happened.